Welcome back to Sunday Agenda. This week we saw US President Obama begin the process of deciding future strategy on the Afghan war. The first meeting of his War Council pulled together all the main players, including the US commander in Afghanistan, General Stanley McChrystal, by video link from his headquarters, and he later had face-to-face time with President Obama on Air Force One during his dash to and from Copenhagen. The President's faced with a wide range of questions, including the big ones: is this really a war worth fighting, and is it winnable? I spoke with Professor Geoffrey Garrett, CEO of the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. Geoff Garrett, thanks very much for joining us.
You're most welcome, Helen. It's a pleasure.
Now, President Obama has a huge challenge on his hands still with Afghanistan. How serious a quagmire is it for him?
Well, I think the problem for the President at the moment is it's probably a double quagmire. The sort of what's the right strategy on the ground in Afghanistan is a really difficult question, but it's also become a political quagmire for him in Washington, where we have extremes of opinion from sort of the US needs 200,000 troops for a decade in Afghanistan all the way to an immediate pullout. And the President's in the middle, and he hasn't said anything other than that he's doing another comprehensive review of policy.
Well, during the campaign, correct me if I'm wrong, but he said very much that, we have to concentrate our efforts on Afghanistan, that Iraq was really no longer the issue. And now it's become a very big, both a military and a political problem for him.
Yeah, that's true. And if you go back, it was actually about a year ago, maybe a little before the Lehman Brothers fall, when Obama rose to prominence on these pristine anti-Iraq credentials he had. He didn't vote for the Iraq war. He was a critic from the beginning, but he needed to shore up his national security credibility, so he said that Afghanistan was the right war. That made perfect political sense 12 months ago. The problem is that the military strategy for winning in Afghanistan wasn't clear then, and it's probably less clear today.
So is it like Vietnam?
People are really worried about that, I think. What happened in Vietnam was that President Lyndon Johnson was stuck in Vietnam. It was an unpopular war, but he thought from an American credibility standpoint it was just going to be impossible to withdraw. As ultimately happened, of course, from the rooftops withdrawal in Saigon in 1975. Obama can't afford to be seen to cut and run in Afghanistan, but what a go-ahead strategy means is just far from clear today. We have public airing of radically different proposals from all of the top political and military players right now, with the President not taking a stand.
But that's amazing in itself, that it's all been leaked. Each side wants to leak their point of view.
Yeah, when you have the Vice President saying, listen, we can't have a counterinsurgency strategy targeted at the Taliban, we must have a much narrower counter-terror strategy targeted al-Qaeda on one side, and then you have your top military general saying we need at least 40,000 more troops to fight an ongoing counterinsurgency war, that's pretty tough.
So can President Obama, he can't really pull back, can he? The Biden strategy isn't really going to work if they want to finish with the Taliban in Afghanistan and perhaps finish with al-Qaeda, and yet will 40,000 more troops do the work as well?
Well, I've heard some sort of true believers on the military side say that 40,000 isn't enough. 40,000 would get you to about 110,000 American troops, and some people say, no, we need 200,000 troops and they've got to be there for a decade.
So it could just be more and more and more Americans going to fight in Afghanistan.
And the problem, which is both a strategy problem and a political problem, is what's the game plan? What are you trying to do? The US has supported the Karzai government. Now everyone thinks the Karzai government is both corrupt and illegitimate. The US was there to get the Taliban out of Afghanistan. Now the Taliban is back. And then you have this third strand that says, wait a second, wasn't the real story that al-Qaeda launched the September 11 attacks from Afghanistan? So you've got these three things: Karzai government, Taliban, al-Qaeda. What's the real strategy? We don't know what President Obama's answer to that question is.
And I mean, the Taliban activities and insurgent violence have increased. According to many media reports, they affected about, 50% of the country 2 years ago. And this year, 2009, they're affecting something like 80% of the country. So is the Taliban really the enemy, or is it still Al-Qaeda?
Well, you can ask me that question, but the person we should be asking the question is President Obama,
so
because he hasn't been clear.
So what do you think he thinks, or is this what they're still trying to work out in this war cabinet at the moment?
They're clearly trying to figure it out, and I think as I said, the strategy problem and the political problem is that people are leaking views all over the place. So Obama tries to say that he wants to have robust discussions behind closed doors, but then when a decision is taken, it's ironclad discipline. We're all speaking with the same voice. In this case, we've got it going the other way, which is everyone who's got a dog in the fight is expressing their opinions in public before the president has come up with a unified position for the government.
So does this really mean that President Obama has lost control?
Well, the last few months have been really bad for President Obama. So he's had this healthcare fiasco on domestic policy. His other big domestic agenda items, climate change and financial regulation, are being pushed off into the indefinite future, into 2010. He's run up unprecedented debt in the US, which means spending any more money is really tough. And on top of that, you've got...
Particularly on a war,
well,
with 40,000 more troops.
It's not only one war. There's still more than 100,000 American troops in Iraq. You've got Afghanistan scaling up to over 100,000 troops. And then you've got this question of what's your Iran strategy, where Iran now says it's closer to having nuclear weapons than ever before. Tough time to be the US president.
So my question is, has he lost control?
You'd have to say that he's lost control, but I think the more important question is whether he can regain it. Obama still has all the qualities that made him a walk-on-water president 9 months ago, 6 months ago. The question is how quickly he can rebound.
So what should Australia do you think?
What should Australia do? It's a very interesting question. It seems to me there are at least two elements to the question. The first one is, what's the right thing for Australia to do in a sort of direct national security sense? Does it make sense for Australia to be in a war in Afghanistan with a view to reducing the likelihood of a terrorist attack in Australia or on Australians? That's one way to ask the question. The other way to ask the question is, does it make sense for Australia to continue to be in the war supporting the United States, as it's been since 2001, in an environment where all the other US allies are pulling back from Afghanistan? So I think there's this interest from an Australian diplomatic standpoint. There are these interesting two tracks. What's the narrow national self-interest with respect to fighting back terrorism? And the second one is, how should Australia play its alliance relationship with the US? Very big questions, obviously, for Australian foreign policy.
Well, given that we have seen from the Rudd government so far a reluctance to commit more troops, what would you say their position is?
Well, I think their position, as publicly stated, and probably what's going on behind closed doors, is pretty clear, which is that Prime Minister Rudd, like President Obama, said that Afghanistan was the right war and that Australia was going to be in Afghanistan for the long haul, whatever it takes. So the sensible position for the Prime Minister is to keep to that line, to keep the Australian troops there, to cooperate with the Americans as much as possible, and to try to be as effective as possible without further loss of Australian life. Is an Australian pullout from Afghanistan in the cards? I think the one-word answer to that would have to be no.
And what is the feeling of the American public? How disenchanted have they become over all this, particularly since the results of the election in Afghanistan?
You know, I think the big story on American public opinion is that Americans haven't been paying attention to the Afghanistan war. After September 11, it was all Iraq all the time. Then it was all global financial crisis all the time, and most recently it's been all about this bizarre healthcare debate. I think the political management, the public opinion management problem for the president is when American citizens start to pay attention to Afghanistan, they're unlikely to be supportive because it's got all the problems of the Iraq war, no exit strategy, no strategy for winning, what's the goalpost, in spades.
Okay, Geoff Garrett, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Helen.